Imagine you are packing your bags. You've just booked a flight, right?
Right, the exciting part.
Yeah, exactly. Your itinerary is neatly saved on your phone, and you are finally stepping out of a shuttle onto the sun-drenched beach of this like beautiful resort,
Oh, that sounds perfect right about now.
doesn't it?
Mm.
I mean, you can smell the salt in the air, you can feel the warm, powdery sand giving way under your heels, and you hear the rhythmic crash of the waves.
You're really setting the scene here.
I'm trying because, in the moment, you think to yourself that you are simply taking a well deserved vacation, like a totally individual choice.
Just a simple, necessary break from the daily grind.
Right. But what if every single interaction you have on that trip, every dollar you spend at the local gift shop, and every spoken and unspoken rule you follow is actually playing out a massive, centuries old sociological blueprint?
It really fundamentally upends how we look at leisure, isn't it?
It completely flips it.
Because we naturally view our vacations as a total escape from society. We leave our jobs, we leave our hometowns, and we shed all our daily responsibilities.
It's just unplug.
Exactly, we unplug. But sociology suggests the complete opposite. It suggests that in our attempt to escape the system, we're actually stepping into one of the most complex, highly engineered social structures ever designed by human beings.
And decoding that hidden structure is our mission for today's deep dive.
It's a big mission.
It really is. We are going to completely deconstruct the world of tourism. To do that, we are looking at your next vacation through three of the most foundational, massive lenses in sociology.
Structural functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism.
Yeah, those are the big three. I'm drawing from a dense, highly rigorous academic paper on the sociology of tourism today.
But, we're not just going to read you a textbook.
No, definitely not. Our goal is to translate these heavy theoretical frameworks into like relatable insight. We want to show you the hidden wiring behind the walls of your hotel room.
So that you will never look at a simple beach holiday the same way again.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why does sociology even care about tourism in the first place? I mean, shouldn't they be studying, I don't know, crime or politics?
Well, tourism is uniquely positioned for this kind of analysis because it is so much more than just an economic sector.
How so?
I mean, it is the largest peaceful movement of human beings in the history of our species.
Wait, really? The largest?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
Billions of people cross borders every year for the sole purpose of leisure. That's completely unprecedented historically.
Yeah, I guess when you put it like that, it is kind of wild.
Right. And sociology studies human behavior and the patterns of social relationships. For a very long time, academia only cared about work, religion, and politics, like you said.
Mm.
Leisure was just considered, frivolous.
Just a side thing.
Exactly. But when a society has the wealth, the infrastructure, and the cultural mandate to send its citizens across the planet just to relax, well, that becomes a living, breathing laboratory.
Because it forces all these different cultures to interact.
Yes. And it literally reshapes the physical geography of the earth. I mean, it reveals the deepest power dynamics of our modern world.
So it's like, if you want to understand what a society truly values, you have to look at what it builds for fun.
That is perfectly stated.
Well, that's up our first major lens perfectly. To understand the vacation, we have to start by zooming all the way out.
Oh, macro.
Very macro. Before we can look at you, the individual person sitting by the pool, we have to look at the massive societal apparatus that constructed the pool, right?
The society that paved the roads to the airport and built the airplane.
Exactly. So we're starting with the structural functionalist approach. This theory basically looks at society as a self-correcting system, right?
That is the core philosophy, yeah.
Hmm.
Functionalists basically view society as a giant living organism.
Like a human body.
Right. If you look at human anatomy, you have a heart, lungs, a brain, a digestive tract.
And they all have a job.
Exactly. Each of these organs is highly specialized, they're completely interrelated, and they each perform a specific function necessary to keep the entire body alive.
And in a state of balance.
Yes, equilibrium. Because if the lungs fail, the heart suffers. Functionalism applies this exact same logic to human society.
So what are the organs of society then?
The organs are its institutions. So the education system, the legal system, the family unit, the economy, and crucially for us today, the tourism industry.
Okay, so every single one of these institutions exists because it serves a necessary function to maintain social order.
You've got it. That's the baseline.
I always think of it less like human biology and more like a massive continuously running video game server.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, utilize background processes running resource allocation, load balancing, error correction. Every piece of code, no matter how obscure, is just trying to keep the server from crashing.
That's a great way to look at it. And to understand how that code is written, our sources point us to Emil Durkheim.
Right, Durkheim, the grandfather of this stuff.
He is arguably the architect of this entire way of thinking. Back in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, he proposed something that was highly radical at the time.
Which was what?
He argued that society is a distinct, separate entity that is entirely greater than the sum of its individual parts.
Wait, so society isn't just the people in it.
Right. It's not just a collection of individuals who happen to be standing in the same room. It has a life, a force, and an architecture all its own.
So we aren't just these independent actors making totally free choices. We're sort of operating inside an invisible matrix.
Yes. And he called the rules of that matrix social facts. Durkheim insisted that we have to treat social facts as tangible objects.
Tangible, like I can touch them.
Well, obviously, literally, but he meant they are as real and as solid as a brick wall in how they affect you. A social fact is an external constraint that shapes your behavior, often without you even realizing it.
Okay, give me an example of a social fact.
Language is a brilliant example. You didn't invent the English language, right?
Definitely not.
Yet you were completely bound by its grammatical rules and its vocabulary in order to communicate your deepest personal thoughts.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I literally can't think outside of the words I've been given.
Exactly. Currency is another one. A piece of printed paper or a digital number on a banking app only has value because the invisible collective weight of society agrees it does.
Right. Without that agreement, it's just paper. And that collective agreement ties into what the text calls the collective consciousness.
Yes, the collective consciousness.
I always think about this when I'm at like a massive theme park or an airport terminal. You see hundreds of people organically forming a neat single file line for a coffee shop.
It's fascinating to watch.
It really is, because there are no police officers forcing them to do it. Nobody is threatening them, but they just naturally queue up.
That cue is the physical manifestation of collective consciousness. It is the shared beliefs, the moral attitudes, and deeply internalized norms that operate as a unifying force.
It's like the invisible gravity of society.
Exactly. You stand in line because the internalized norm of fairness, the idea of first come, first served, is so deeply ingrained in your psyche that violating it would cause you intense social anxiety.
Oh, totally. If I cut a line of 50 people, I would feel sick. You feel the judgment of the crowd.
And that collective consciousness is what keeps society from descending into chaos every single day.
But what happens when that server does start to crash? Like if people stop believing in the queue or the currency or the laws?
That is what Durkheim's most afraid of. He had a specific term for that systemic breakdown. He called it anomie.
Anomie. ANOMIE, right?
Yes. It translates roughly to a state of normlessness. It is a highly dangerous, terrifying condition where the social bonds deteriorate and individuals no longer know what the rules are.
That sounds incredibly stressful.
It is. Without clear norms or a sense of belonging to a larger whole, people experience profound psychological distress, alienation, and despair. Durkheim actually linked anomie to rising suicide rates.
Oh, wow. So it's a literal matter of life and death.
It is. Therefore, from a functionalist perspective, society is constantly terrified of anomie. It desperately needs its institutions like religion, schools, and even tourism to function smoothly.
So we can maintain that harmonious equilibrium and keep the darkness at bay.
Precisely.
Okay, let's ground this massive abstract concept into a tangible reality. The sources highlight Talcott Parsons, who basically took Durkheim's philosophy and engineered it into a highly systematic framework.
Yes, the AGIL model. AGIL.
Right, and the premise here is that any society must solve 4 specific problems to survive.
4 functional imperatives, he called them.
I want to spend some real time exploring this because I think it's so cool. Let's invent a hypothetical place. Let's call it San Telmo.
Okay, San Telmo.
It's a small, isolated coastal fishing village that is on the brink of economic collapse, but it's about to transform into a global tourist hotspot.
A very common scenario, actually.
Right. So how does Parsons' AGIL model map onto the survival of San Telmo? Let's start with A, adaptation.
Adaptation is the system's ability to interact with its external environment to secure the resources it needs to survive.
So in San Telmo, the historical environment provided fish.
Yes, the entire economy was based on it. But let's say the fish population is completely depleted due to climate shifts.
The village is facing anomie.
Exactly, it's facing collapse. So to survive, the social system must adapt. The local leaders realize they have pristine beaches and a beautiful climate.
So they pivot.
They do. They begin courting foreign developers to build hotels and restaurants. They're drawing in a brand new external resource international tourist capital to replace the fish.
So the town is adapting its economic engine to stabilize itself. That's A.
Right. Which leads to G goal attainment.
Okay, so adaptation gets the money in the door. How does goal attainment work? Is it figuring out what to do with the money?
Basically, yes. A society needs direction and political coordination. Goal attainment is the political apparatus deciding on a collective objective.
Because for San Telmo, just bringing in developers could lead to like chaotic, unregulated building that ruins the beaches.
Exactly. So the local government, community leaders, and citizen councils have to define a vision. Let's say they decide we want to become the premier high-end, eco-friendly boutique destination in this hemisphere.
So they aren't going for cheap mega resorts, they're going for luxury ecotourism.
Right. And goal attainment involves passing zoning laws, securing funding for a new airport that can handle international flights, and maybe subsidizing green energy for the hotels.
It is the political steering wheel of the society.
Yes, perfect. That is goal attainment.
Which naturally leads to Aya's integration. The sources describe this as maintaining solidarity and coordinating the different parts of the system.
This is a tricky one.
Yeah, in our San Telmo example, I imagine this is where the friction really starts. You have the old guard who used to fish, and you have the new influx of wealthy tourists and hospitality workers.
It's a massive collision of lifestyles. Integration is arguably the most difficult challenge for any transitioning society.
Because it's the legal and social mechanism that prevents the internal factions from tearing each other apart.
Exactly. Think about it. The fishermen wake up at 4 a.m. to prep their boats. The tourists want to party at beach clubs until 3 a.m.
Oh man, yeah. That is a recipe for disaster.
If the system doesn't integrate these conflicting needs, the town will fracture. So the system creates new norms. It establishes designated entertainment zones far from residential neighborhoods. It implements strict noise ordinances.
But integration isn't just about laws, right? It's about social cohesion too.
Right, it's cultural integration as well. The town might start hosting a massive annual seafood and heritage festival where the old fishing culture is celebrated and consumed by the new tourists.
Oh, that's smart. It creates a shared social space where locals and visitors can interact harmoniously.
Yes, ensure different parts of the system remain coordinated rather than antagonistic. That's the integration.
Okay, that leaves us with the final letter, L latency. The text also refers to this as pattern maintenance.
Yes, latency.
So if adaptation is the economy, goal attainment is the politics, and integration is the law. What is latency?
Latency is the cultural soul of the system.
The soul.
Yeah, it is how society manages the inner emotional tensions of its individuals and ensures that its core values are transmitted to the next generation.
Oh, I see. Because as San Telmo transforms into this bustling tourist hub, how do they prevent losing their identity completely?
Exactly. How do they ensure the teenagers growing up there understand the value of their unique heritage when they're surrounded by, globalized homogenous hotel chains?
So latency mechanisms would be like family traditions.
Family traditions, the local history museums, the religious festivals, and even the specialized tourism schools that teach the local youth how to blend modern hospitality with indigenous traditions.
So latency operates in the background, quietly regenerating the cultural DNA of the society so that it doesn't lose its sense of self over time.
That's beautifully put. It maintains the pattern.
That is an incredibly elegant framework. Adaptation, goal attainment, integration, latency. It makes society look like a beautifully optimized machine.
It really does, on paper.
But obviously, society is deeply messy. Like the code in our video game server analogy constantly produces glitches.
Oh, absolutely.
And that brings us to Robert K. Merton, who added some much needed realism to this theory. He argued that we can't just look at what a system is supposed to do, right?
Right. We have to look at what it actually does. Merton is brilliant here because he recognized that institutions often produce multiple overlapping outcomes.
And he had a way to categorize these, didn't he?
He did. He introduced a taxonomy, dividing outcomes primarily into manifest functions and latent functions.
Let's find those.
Sure. A manifest function is the obvious, explicitly stated, and intended purpose of an institution or an action.
Like the manifest function of a university is to educate young adults and produce research.
Exactly. The manifest function of a police department is to enforce the law. It's the mission statement.
Okay, and the latent function.
The latent function is the hidden, unintended, and often completely unrecognized side effect of that institution.
So sticking with the university example.
If the manifest function of a university is education, A latent function might be serving as a massive matchmaking service where young adults find their future spouses.
Oh, interesting. Or acting as a gatekeeper that perpetuates class divisions based on who can afford tuition.
Exactly. These outcomes are not in the official brochure, but they are vital functions the institution performed for society.
It's an interesting paradox, right? Because if we look at the tourism industry as a massive societal institution, its manifest function is pretty obvious.
Right. It exists to provide leisure, facilitate economic exchange, and allow for cultural exploration.
We generally view vacation as an escape from the capitalist machine, but functionalism seems to argue that our escape is actually a required maintenance cycle for the machine.
That is a profound realization, and it is completely central to the sociology of leisure. Think about modern industrialized society,
High demands for productivity, relentless deadlines.
intense urbanization. It puts enormous psychological pressure on the individual. If people were forced to work endlessly without any sanctioned release, the accumulated stress would result in that dreaded enemy.
The workforce would burn out or rebel or just collapse.
Precisely. Therefore, tourism functions as a societal pressure release valve. You
Mhm.
save your money, you fly to a beach, you lie in the sun, you disconnect.
And then, crucially, you return to your job rejuvenated.
Yes, you come back ready to be a highly productive, compliant worker for another 50 weeks. The vacation isn't an escape from the system. It is the exact mechanism the system uses to sustain itself.
Like the server rebooting itself so it doesn't crash. That is slightly terrifying, but it makes complete logical sense.
It's functional.
Okay, so what about the latent functions of tourism? What are the massive unintended consequences of billions of people traveling?
One of those fascinating latent functions is the rapid global standardization of language and infrastructure.
Because everyone has to communicate.
Right. When millions of international tourists descend on diverse locations, they don't all speak the local dialect. As a result, English has inadvertently become the global lingua franca of the hospitality industry.
So, a local cafe in rural Thailand or a hotel in Iceland will adopt English menus, not because it's an official government mandate, but as an unintended survival mechanism to capture tourist dollars.
Exactly. Another latent function is the sudden revitalization of dying cultural practices.
How does that work?
Well, a local community might have largely abandoned a traditional style of weaving or a specific folk dance because it had no modern utility, didn't pay the bills.
Right.
But when tourists arrive and are willing to pay top dollar to see authentic culture, that dying practice is suddenly resurrected. The community's cultural pride is unexpectedly reinforced by the gaze of the outsider.
But those latent functions still sound somewhat positive or at least neutral. The sources point out that Merton also identified dysfunctions.
Yes, dysfunctions are crucial to his theory.
Because obviously, dropping millions of people into a delicate ecosystem isn't just going to produce cross cultural harmony and language skills.
Not at all. Dysfunctions are the unintended negative consequences that actively disrupt the balance and harmony of the system.
Like environmental damage.
Yes, in the realm of tourism, dysfunctions are arguably the most visible impacts today. We are talking about severe environmental degradation, the destruction of ancient coral reefs by cruise ships, or the depletion of local water tables to keep golf courses green in desert resort towns.
Or massive infrastructural strain, like a historic European city built for pedestrian traffic suddenly buckling under the weight of tour buses and millions of daily visitors.
Exactly.
And the housing crisis. We see this everywhere now. A town becomes popular, foreign investors buy up all the residential apartments to convert them into short-term vacation rentals.
And suddenly the local nurses, teachers, and service workers are completely priced out of the city they actually run.
That is a massive dysfunction.
It is a primary dysfunction. The very workers required to keep the adaptation and integration gears turning can no longer afford to live inside the system. The equilibrium is severely threatened.
Which perfectly exposes the massive blind spot of this entire theory, right?
Oh, absolutely.
If the server is running and the overall system is maintaining its equilibrium, the admins don't really care if the individual NPCs are suffering.
That's a great way to put it.
If the resort relies on a shadow class of underpaid labor commuting 3 hours a day just to clean the rooms, a strict functionalist would just look at that and say, well, their cheap labor is functioning to keep the tourist prices down, which keeps the economy stable.
Right.
It feels like a very convenient excuse for the people at the top to ignore exploitation.
You have articulated the exact devastating critique leveled against the structural functionalist approach by modern sociologists.
It's just so conservative.
The primary criticism is that it is fundamentally and inherently conservative. Because the theory places such a massive premium on balance and order, it views almost any radical social change as a dangerous pathology.
It has a deep status quo bias. It assumes whatever currently exists must exist for a good reason.
It absolutely does.
Okay.
By obsessively trying to find the function in every social arrangement, it risks justifying deep systemic inequalities as somehow natural or necessary for the greater good.
It just completely sidelines individual human agency.
Completely. It ignores the unique, agonizing struggles of marginalized subgroups who are crushed by that very equilibrium.
And perhaps most importantly, it completely fails to explain how genuine revolutionary social change actually happens. Because if every part is perfectly adapted to maintain the whole, why would the system ever change?
It wouldn't. And that logical gap demands a completely different perspective.
Which brings us to our second lens. If functionalism is the illusion of harmony, if it's just the server admins desperately trying to keep the system online, regardless of who gets hurt, we need a lens that actively hunts for the cracks in the foundation.
We need to ask, who actually benefits from this supposed harmony?
Yeah, exactly. This takes us to body section 2, conflict theory. We are moving from the grand machine to the battleground.
It's quite a shift in perspective. If functionalism looks at society and sees a healthy, cooperative organism, conflict theory looks at the exact same society and sees a brutal, zero-sum battleground.
So no kumbaya.
No kumbaya. The core philosophy here is that society is not based on consensus, shared values, or a collective desire for equilibrium. It is based entirely on domination, competing interests, and relentless resource hoarding.
So using this lens, the queue at the theme park isn't a beautiful manifestation of shared moral norms.
No, not at all.
It's a mechanism designed to keep the masses docile, while the VIPs who pay triple the price bypass the line completely.
That is the exact analytical shift. Conflict theory argues that order in society is not maintained by some invisible glue of collective consciousness. Order is maintained by force, coercion, and systemic oppression.
The groups who hold the power design the institutions.
Right. They write the laws and shape the culture specifically to protect their own dominance and keep competing groups marginalized.
And crucially, social change does not happen slowly and organically to maintain balance.
Change only occurs through intense friction, tension, resistance, and revolution.
You cannot discuss conflict theory without immediately diving into Karl Marx. The sources lean very heavily on his framework here.
Marx is the foundational pillar of this theory.
Let's explore Marx's foundational vision of society and how it applies to our modern world of travel.
Karl Marx argued that the defining central feature of any society is its economic structure. He viewed history as a continuous struggle over resources.
Okay.
In the context of capitalist society, he divided the population strictly based on their relationship to the means of production. He identified two primary antagonistic camps.
The famous two camps.
Yes. First, you have the bourgeoisie, the wealthy ruling class.
Mhm.
They own the factories, the land, the raw materials, the intellectual property, and the technology.
So in our tourism context, they own the international mega resorts, the cruise ship fleets, and the airlines.
Exactly. They hold the capital. And on the other side, you have the proletariat, the massive working class. The proletariat own absolutely nothing except their own physical and mental labor.
So they have to sell their time.
Yes. In order to survive, to buy food and shelter, they are forced to sell their labor to the bourgeoisie.
Mm.
And because the bourgeoisie control the resources, they have the leverage to extract maximum value from the proletariat's labor while paying them the absolute minimum required to keep them alive and working.
It is a relationship defined purely by exploitation.
Purely.
So if I use my PR department analogy, if the base, the raw economic power is the money, then the superstructure must be the PR department.
The PR department, I like where this is going.
Yeah, like the schools, the media, the legal system, the PR department that convinces everyone this unequal distribution of wealth is actually perfectly fair and natural.
That analogy is remarkably accurate. Marx introduced this architectural metaphor of the base and the superstructure to explain how dominance is sustained.
Walk us through that.
The base is the economy, the raw materials, the machinery, the exploitative class relations. Marx argued that this economic base dictates absolutely everything else in society.
Everything is built on the money.
Yes. The superstructure is everything built on top of that foundation. Government, the laws, religion, education, art, and philosophy.
And the bourgeoisie, because they own the base, completely control the superstructure.
Exactly. They use it to legitimize their power. They fund the political campaigns that write tax loopholes for their corporations. They shape the educational curriculum to produce obedient workers rather than critical thinkers.
They use the superstructure to convince the proletariat that their poverty is a result of their own personal failure rather than a mathematically rigged system.
That is the function of the superstructure, yes.
So, bringing this back to our deep dive on tourism, when I book a flight to a developing nation for a cheap, all inclusive beach holiday, I am not just taking a break.
No, you're not.
According to this theory, I am actively participating in and benefiting from a global class war.
The sociology of tourism through a Marxist lens is highly critical and often deeply uncomfortable for the tourist.
So I can feel that, yeah.
Conflict theory argues that global tourism inherently deepens economic inequality. It is a stark visual manifestation of the global divide between the global north and the global south.
Because when a tourist from a wealthy, industrialized nation travels to a developing region, the dynamic is deeply unequal.
The tourist demands luxury, pristine environments, and constant service. The local worker, driven by economic necessity, must provide that luxury, often for poverty wages.
The resort becomes a gated citadel of the bourgeoisie dropped right into the middle of the proletariat.
That's a very evocative way to describe it.
And the economic benefits don't even stay in the host country, do they?
Usually they don't.
Because if I stay at a massive, globally recognized hotel chain in a small island nation, my money isn't building local schools, it's being funneled right back to a corporate headquarters in New York or London.
This is a concept known as economic leakage. The local environment is exploited, the local water is drained, the local labor is exhausted, but the massive profits are repatriated to the wealthy core nations.
The overarching global economic structure of dominance remains entirely unchallenged. In fact, it is strengthened by the tourism industry.
Exactly.
But the sources also broaden this battlefield. They make a point to introduce Max Weber, who looked at Marx's obsession with money and basically said, "You are missing a huge piece of the puzzle."
Right. Weber fundamentally agreed with Marx that conflict and power struggles are the engines of society. But he argued that Marx was entirely too economically deterministic.
Meaning Marx focused too much on just the cash.
Yes. Wealth is obviously a massive source of power, but Weber insisted that power is also about social prestige, status groups, and forms of legitimate authority.
So you can have power without necessarily being a billionaire.
Exactly. You can possess immense power over others without necessarily having vast wealth, provided that society accepts your authority as legitimate.
Let's explore that mechanism. What exactly makes authority legitimate in Weber's eyes, especially when we look at the interactions on a vacation?
Weber categorized legitimate authority into three distinct types. First is charismatic authority.
Okay, charismatic.
This is power derived purely from the extraordinary, almost magnetic personality of an individual. People follow them because of their vision or heroism.
Give me a tourism example of that.
In the context of tourism, think of a widely popular, deeply knowledgeable local wilderness guide. They might not be wealthy, but when they take a group of rich tourists into the jungle, that guide holds absolute authority.
Oh, that's true. The tourists hang on their every word and follow their every command because of their charismatic expertise.
Exactly.
The second type is traditional authority, right?
Yes. Traditional authority is power legitimized by a deep-seated respect for long-standing cultural patterns and historical customs.
Like a royal family or something.
Or think of a village elder or an indigenous chief who negotiates land use rights with international resort developers.
Yeah.
Their power doesn't come from a bank account. It comes from the sacred historical lineage they represent.
Okay. And the third type is the one we probably interact with the most. Legal rational authority.
Yes, legal rational authority is power legitimized by legally enacted bureaucratic rules and regulation. It is the power of the office, not the person.
So like the Customs and Border Control agent who stamps your passport?
Or the aviation administration that dictates what you can bring on a plane. Or the hotel manager enforcing the checkout time. Their authority comes from a massive rationalized legal framework.
So Weber showed that the battleground of society isn't just simple war between the rich and the poor. It is fought on multiple complex fronts involving money, cultural prestige, and bureaucratic power.
Exactly. It's much more nuanced than just the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat.
This brings us to a concept from Antonio Gramsci that I find to be the most subtle and insidious part of conflict theory, the concept of hegemony.
Hegemony is a brilliant concept.
How does hegemony explain why the oppressed don't just constantly revolt against the system? Because if it's really a class war, why aren't people rioting every day?
Gramsci was a brilliant Marxist thinker who grappled with that exact question. He looked at the massive inequality of the capitalist system and asked, Why hasn't the working class violently overthrown the bourgeoisie? Why do they tolerate their own exploitation?
And his answer was,
His answer was cultural hegemony. He argued that the ruling class does not maintain long term power primarily through physical force, police brutality, or military coercion. You can't hold a society together forever at gunpoint.
so what do they do?
Instead, they maintain power by manufacturing consent.
Manufacturing consent, that phrase gives me chills. They manipulate the narrative so well that the oppressed actually agree with the terms of their own oppression.
That is the insidious brilliance of it. The ruling class manipulates the cultural institutions, the media, the schools, the religious institutions, so that their specific worldview, their values, and their economic interests become the accepted, unquestioned cultural norm.
It ceases to look like a political ideology, it just becomes common sense.
Exactly. The oppressed internalize the dominant ideology, believing that the system is fair or at least inevitable, and they unknowingly police themselves.
We see this constantly in tourism. Think about how local cultures are commodified, packaged, and sold to please the expectations of the tourists.
The commodification of culture is a textbook example of hegemony.
How so?
Imagine a local indigenous community that has deeply sacred, highly complex spiritual dances. These rituals might take days to perform and hold profound religious significance regarding their ancestors and the cosmos.
Very sacred stuff.
But a massive resort opens next door, and the tourists want authentic entertainment while they eat their buffet dinner. So the resort hires the locals, but tells them to cut the dance down to a 35-minute, highly energetic, brightly colored spectacle.
Oh, wow. They strip out the complex theology and just keep the acrobatics because that's what the tourist is willing to pay for.
Exactly. And Gramsci's point is that the local community doesn't necessarily fight this commodification with pitchforks. Driven by the desperate economic need of the base, they consent to performing this watered down, hollowed out version of their own soul.
And the tragedy of hegemony is what happens over generations.
Over time, the youth of that community might only ever learn the 45-minute tourist version of the dance.
The dominant ideology, the idea that their ancient culture is simply a consumable product to be sold to foreigners, becomes fully internalized. It becomes their new reality.
That is how the ruling class wins without firing a single shot.
Man, I have to pause and push back here. This is an incredibly bleak way to view the world.
It is very dark, yes.
Is every single interaction on a vacation just a miserable, malicious class war? What about genuine human connection?
Right.
Like if a tourist sits at a local bar and they strike up a genuine hours-long conversation with the bartender, they share photos of their kids, they laugh about shared human struggles. Is that just the bourgeoisie coercing the proletariat? It feels like conflict theory completely erases the humanity of the individual.
Your reaction is highly indicative of the major critiques leveled against conflict theory in sociological literature.
I would hope so because it's exhausting.
The theory is frequently criticized for being overwhelmingly deterministic. It treats individuals as if they are mere puppets, helplessly dancing on the strings of the macroeconomy. It struggles to account for individual agency.
It assumes the system dictates every thought and feeling.
Yes. Furthermore, critics point out that Marx's ultimate vision of an eventual classless society, a utopia where all conflict magically ceases to exist, is historically unsupported and highly unrealistic.
And regarding Gramsci's hegemony,
Modern sociologists argue that he underestimates the quiet, everyday resilience of marginalized people. The bartender might be smiling and wearing the uniform required by the multinational corporation, but they might also be subtly mocking the tourist, overcharging them, or finding micro ways to subvert the economic system and reclaim their dignity.
people are not just passive receptacles for dominant ideologies.
Exactly. Conflict theory is excellent at exposing massive structural inequalities, but it often misses the nuanced, equitable, and genuine connections that happen on the ground level.
Which provides the most logical pivot to our third and final lens.
We're zooming in again.
We started by looking at the entire forest with functionalism. Then we looked at the wealthy logging companies who own the forest with conflict theory. But where is the individual tree?
Where are you in all this?
Exactly. Where are you, the person listening to this, in this massive web of systems and power? This brings us all the way down to the micro level. Let's dive into body section 3, symbolic interactionism.
If the first two theories were operating at 30,000 feet, symbolic interactionism drops us right onto the sidewalk.
So no more grand systems.
No. This approach fundamentally rejects the idea that society is some massive, external, abstract structure pushing down on us. To an interactionist, society isn't a thing out there. Society is a verb.
A verb. I like that.
It is something we do. It is built continuously, moment by moment, from the ground up through daily, meaningful interactions between individual human beings.
The sources introduced George Herbert Mead here and his concept of the self. This completely changed how I view identity because he argues that the self isn't something you were just born with.
Mead's philosophy is truly revolutionary. He argued that you do not have a static, isolated identity that exists independently of the social world. You are not a locked box of personality traits.
So who am I then?
The self is a highly fluid construct that is born entirely out of social interactions. We literally figure out who we are by constantly observing how other people react to us. We use society as a mirror.
It reminds me of the foundational rule of improv comedy.
Oh, how so?
Well, you step on a stage with another actor, and neither of you knows who you are yet. You make a choice, and then you wait to see how the other actor responds.
Right.
If I walk on stage and confidently declare, I am the captain of this ship, but the other actor says, Sir, this is a Wendy's, my reality is instantly shattered.
That's hilarious, but very accurate.
I have to adjust. I only become the captain if the other person agrees to play the deckhand.
That is a phenomenal analogy. You are constantly negotiating reality. You are reading the subtle cues, the body language, the tone of voice of others to continuously construct and refine your own identity.
And building heavily on Mead's foundational work was Herbert Blumer, who crystallized this approach into 3 core principles of symbolic interactionism.
Yes. Bloomer's 3 principles explain the exact psychological mechanics of how we navigate the world.
Instead of just listing them out, let's weave Blumer's 3 principles into a real scenario. Let's look at the interaction between a tourist and a local merchant in a bustling outdoor market. How does the first principle apply here?
Bloomer's first principle states that human beings act toward things on the basis of the meaning those things have for them.
Okay, meaning.
A thing can be a physical object, a person, or an institution. So let's look at a small carved wooden statue sitting on the merchant's table. To a strict materialist, it is just a piece of wood weighing 8 ounces.
But the tourist doesn't act toward it as a piece of wood.
No, they act toward it as a symbol of authenticity, a token of their adventurous travels, or a thoughtful gift for a loved one.
What about the merchant?
The merchant acts toward it as a symbol of their livelihood, their craftsmanship, or perhaps just a mass-produced item they need to sell to buy dinner. Their actions are driven entirely by the invisible meaning attached to the object, not its physical properties.
And where does that meaning come from? It's not inherently beamed into the wood. That leads to the second principle.
Right. The second principle states that meaning is not inherent. It arises entirely out of social interaction. You are not born knowing the cultural significance of a souvenir.
So the meaning of that carved statue is actively negotiated between the tourist and the merchant in real time.
Exactly. They're like your improv actors. They use symbols to establish their roles.
The symbols of the tourist are usually pretty obvious. The camera slung around the neck, the specific type of lightweight travel clothing, the hesitant use of a pocket phrase book.
Those are the props they use to communicate. I am the visitor. I am here to experience your world.
And the merchant responds with their own set of symbols.
A specific welcoming gesture, wearing traditional clothing that aligns with the tourist's expectations, or using a calculator to bridge the language gap while haggling over the price.
And a handshake at the end of the transaction is the ultimate symbol.
Exactly. A handshake isn't biologically programmed. It's a mutually agreed upon symbol that means the negotiation was successful and trust has been established. Meaning is socially constructed through these precise micro-level exchanges.
Which brings us to Blumer's third principle. Meaning is handled in and modified through an interpretive process. Meaning isn't phrasen.
It is highly volatile. Let's say the tourist buys the statue, believing it to be a rare, one-of-a-kind local artifact. They shake hands, the meaning is established. A respectful exchange of culture for currency.
But then what happens?
As the tourist walks away, they see a shipping box behind the next stall with a made in China stamp, full of the exact same statues.
Oh, brutal.
Instantly, the interpretive process kicks in. The meaning of the statue morphs from sacred artifact to cheap scam.
The meaning of the merchant morphs from authentic artisan to hustler.
And the tourist's own identity might shift from worldly traveler to gullible mark. The reality of the situation is completely rewritten in seconds based on new symbolic information.
That is fascinating. So when we apply this to the sociology of tourism, a destination isn't just statically authentic because it has old buildings.
No, not at all.
It only becomes authentic in the very moment that both the tourist and the local successfully perform and interpret the symbols of authenticity together. It is an act of creation.
There's a lot of truth to that. Symbolic interactionism empowers the individual in a way the macro theories do not. It tells us that we are not just gears in a functionalist machine, and we are not just helpless victims in a Marxist class war.
We possess agency.
We do. We are the active architects of our own social reality. Every time you smile at a stranger, ask for directions, or try a new food on vacation, you are actively participating in the creation of the social world.
I love the agency that this theory provides, but I have to play devil's advocate again. Improv comedy is a great analogy, but the improv scene is still taking place on a physical stage, inside a theater, owned by a billionaire who charges exorbitant ticket prices.
That's a very fair point.
If we just focus on the micro interactions, the smile, the handshake, the mutual meaning making, doesn't that dangerously ignore the massive crushing power imbalances we just discussed in conflict theory?
It does.
Because a friendly negotiation over a souvenir doesn't change the fact that the tourist gets to fly back to a comfortable, climate controlled home, while the merchant might still lack access to basic health care.
You have pinpointed the exact fatal flaw of symbolic interactionism. By staring so intently through the microscope, it completely loses sight of the room it's standing in.
It misses the big picture entirely.
The major critique of this approach is its profound blindness to macro level structural inequalities. It cannot adequately explain how historical power dynamics were formed over centuries,
It doesn't explain why global poverty exists on such a massive racialized scale.
or how huge institutional shifts, like a multinational corporation buying up the entire coastline, actually occur. If you only focus on the interpersonal negotiation of meaning, you completely miss the systemic tidal wave that's about to crash onto the shore.
This is exactly why we cannot rely on just one framework. If you only use functionalism, you become a defender of exploitation in the name of order. If you only use conflict theory, you become a cynical determinist who sees nothing but misery and war. And if you only use symbolic interactionism, you become dangerously naive to the realities of global power.
Which is why we need to synthesize.
Exactly. To really understand the world, we have to synthesize. We need all three lenses simultaneously.
The true power of sociology comes from the ability to hold these competing, often contradictory truths in your mind at the exact same time.
Let's do that right now.
Okay.
To synthesize this, let's take a single complex phenomenon and rapidly shift our perspectives. Let's look at a massive multinational ultra luxury hotel chain constructing a brand new 1,000-room resort on a previously untouched coastline in a developing nation.
A perfect case study.
Okay, I'm looking at this mega resort through the structural functionalist perspective. What do I see?
Through the functionalist lens, you see a triumph of adaptation and integration. You see an economic engine that is providing hundreds of stable jobs to the local community, effectively lowering crime and stabilizing the local economy.
It acts as an infrastructural catalyst.
Exactly, bringing in a foreign tax revenue that funds new roads, water treatment plants, and hospitals. And globally, it serves as a vital pressure release valve, allowing exhausted workers from high-stress industrial nations to recharge their psychological batteries so the global economic system doesn't overheat.
It is a necessary, harmonious gear in the watch.
That's the functionalist view.
That sounds incredibly optimistic. Now, I am dropping that lens and looking at the exact same hotel through the conflict theory perspective. The narrative gets a lot darker. What do I see now?
Through the conflict lens, you see a monument to exploitation and hegemony. You see a massive foreign corporation utilizing legal rational authority to buy up indigenous land for pennies on the dollar.
You see the resort hoarding local resources.
Draining the water table to fill its infinity pools while the local villages face droughts. You see an army of local proletariat workers paid non-living wages to clean the toilets of the global bourgeoisie, while millions of dollars in profit siphoned out of the country to enrich a CEO sitting in a boardroom thousands of miles away.
And you see the rich, complex local culture flattened into a cheap, easily digestible nightly buffet show to manufacture the consent of both the tourist and the worker.
A drastically, radically different reality.
Okay, dropping the conflict lens. Finally, I'm looking through the symbolic interactionism perspective. I am zooming all the way into the lobby of this massive resort. What do I see?
You see a fleeting, highly specific micro moment. A local concierge and a newly arrived jet-lagged guest approach each other.
The guest, wanting to show respect, awkwardly attempts to bow and use a phrase from the local dialect they practiced on the plane.
The concierge recognizes the symbol of respect, smiles warmly, corrects their pronunciation gently, and hands them a room key. In that brief interaction, they are mutually negotiating dignity, defining their temporary relationship and shaping the immediate shared reality of their afternoon.
For those two individual human beings, in that exact second, the macroeconomy of Marx and the systemic equilibrium of Durkheim fade into the background. Only the meaning of their shared symbols matters.
It is genuinely mind blowing how the exact same physical space can yield such radically different truths depending on the framework you apply.
Functionalism gives us the overarching structure. Conflict theory exposes the hidden power. And interactionism reveals the lived humanity.
Sociology doesn't ask you to pick one and discard the rest. It asks you to realize that reality is a composite. The resort is an economic engine. AD is a vehicle for exploitation. AD is a stage for genuine human connection, all at the exact same time.
While we have covered an immense, rigorous amount of ground today, we took a deep dive into the dense academic sociology of tourism, moving from the macro structures of society all the way down to the micro gestures of a handshake.
It's been quite a journey.
I hope we've translated these heavy theories into a practical, illuminating way to view the world. Thank you for coming on this intellectual journey with us. We've learned that whether we are functioning cogs in a giant societal machine, participants in a global struggle for resources, or just individual actors improvising our daily meaning, sociology proves one thing above all else.
Which is,
Nothing about human behavior is an accident.
and that absolutely includes your leisure time. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Go for it.
The next time you travel, whether it is an expensive cross-continental flight or just a simple weekend drive to a neighboring town, pay close attention to a mundane interaction. Something as simple as ordering a cup of coffee from an unfamiliar local cafe.
A completely ordinary moment.
Exactly. As you hand over your money and exchange a greeting with the barista, pause and ask yourself, are you performing a functional, necessary role to keep the economic system stable? Are you participating in a subtle historical performance of global economic dominance? Or are you, in that very micro moment, using the symbols of language and currency to invent a brand new shared reality with a total stranger?
The answer, as we discovered today, is probably all three. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Keep questioning the invisible structures around you, keep looking for the hidden blueprints, and remember, the next time you step out onto that sun-drenched beach, you aren't just escaping society, you are walking right into the very heart of it.